Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Recruiting Podcast. I'm Alex Rojas, your talent advisor and host. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to become a leader within recruiting, specifically within talent acquisition. So there's 3 target audiences that I'm reaching out to today. The first one is if you are a recruiter and you consider yourself to be a contributor. Now, a contributor is somebody who's a worker bee, someone who's an order taker. Then guess what? This episode is not for you. Maybe come back to the next one. The second target audience that I'm reaching out to is that if you are a recruiter and you have aspirations to become a leader, maybe you have that itch to grow, to develop, to nurture, or maybe somebody's told you that you're a natural born leader or you consider yourself to be one, then definitely you want to watch this episode. And then finally, the third target audience that I'm reaching out to here is, of course, if you are already on that career track of being a leader or becoming a leader, then this episode was made for you because we're going to dive right into it. I'm going to discuss the 3 career stages in leadership within talent acquisition. So I came dressed for the part. I got my suit. I dropped the tie, but I'm ready to go. Let's discuss. All right, so let's get after this. The 3 different stages within leadership when it comes to talent acquisition. The first stage is going to be developmental. So you might be a recruiter that's kind of in this particular stage. Now, I'm going to go ahead and outline 5 key areas on what puts you on this sort of career trajectory track when it comes to leadership. So the first one is going to be full life cycle recruiting. That means you have become an expert in this area as a recruiter. You know how to close deals, you know how to negotiate, you know how to make offers, you are good at making good quality hires into your company. You are an outstanding broker for the organization, so you've sort of mastered the skill of being a full life cycle recruiter. Absolutely important as you enter this developmental stage. The second area is going to be mentorship. That means that you were trained by somebody who actually took the time to mentor you, to train you, to develop you, to share all the best practices that they learned, to pass it on over to you, to gave you oversight so that you learned really I would consider the art of the craft. But not only that is, as in the mentorship area, you actually also took the time to help develop others, maybe some junior recruiters or coordinator recruiters. This gave you the ability to harness in on your skills. So you take the time developing others. And more importantly, within this mentorship phase is that you become a super user with tools, with technology. And when you do that, you actually not only you learn the best practices, the workarounds, but you start showing and demonstrating to others on your team what you're capable of. The third area is going to be team lead. That's right. In some way or some capacity, you have already stepped up to the plate, whether it's official or unofficially recognized, you have really harnessed in that spirit of team leadership. That means maybe you've worked on a project or a big win or a program, and you've actually led and spearheaded a project to success. That means you've shown sort of the initiative. You've taken initiative to go ahead and make it successful. And more importantly, when you take on a project, that means that you have to give status updates, which means you have to know how to brief your stakeholders, your customers, your colleagues, your coworkers, whatever it might be. And that is an important skill set to have. The fourth area, when we're talking about the developmental stage of leadership, is going to be communications. That's right. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you're good at building relationships. And most people that are in this developmental stage are pretty personable, friendly, approachable, and they just know how to engage and discuss. And whether it's written, verbal, or nonverbal cues, you give off these really warm, friendly vibes that says, hey, that person, that recruiter has potential. And so that's going to be important because you know how to be authentic and communicate at a level that's different from maybe some of the worker bees who are just really transactional transactional recruiters. And finally, the fifth area in the developmental stage is going to be that you as a recruiter are leading by example. That means you have been put in position to lead by example. And so that's just having really positive working environments, positive collaboration, not only with your coworkers, but also with your hiring managers, with the leaders within your company, or even your customers. And more importantly, when meetings are taking place, guess what? You're not a bystander. You're not in the stands. You're actually participating in meetings. You're giving recommendations. You're giving sort of perceptions that you're seeing, and you're letting them know that you have a pulse on the marketplace, and you're demonstrating the ability that you have a higher level of reputation as a potential leader. These are really important factors to consider, areas that you want to develop. And so identify if you are in this stage of becoming a leader, you are in the developmental stage. All right, so the second way to become an effective leader in recruiting is going to be really operational. So at this stage of the talent acquisition sort of business model, you really fall under the operations side of the house, and more specifically, daily operations. So as a manager, as a leader, as a team lead, you are now have been entrusted to really be part of making sure that the engine is working every day, that the lights stay turned on within your operation. So you may be leading a team that's small, mid, or large size. It doesn't matter, but ultimately there's a lot of moving parts within the life cycle process. And more importantly, in this leadership role, you are here to really execute the mission and the purpose of leadership of your boss as well. So you want to make sure that you're delivering on all those areas and making sure that you understand clearly the playbook of your day-to-day operations. The second area under this operational sort of leadership sort of framework here is going to be process optimization. You as a recruiter need to make sure that you understand the process, the policy, the procedures, areas that you can do analysis, areas that you can do process improvement, areas that you can look at, especially for recruiting. There's a lot of areas that we do assessing of tools, of technology, and so that's going to be really important because a lot of times, you're really you're kind of falling in under the black cloud of recruiting is when it comes to tools and technologies. Are they using it? Is there an effective adoption? And so being able to kind of make sure that you monitor that is going to be really important. Best practices is another area here that you really want to stay focused on, because as best practices, you don't just want to have a standard sort of level, because you've been elevated into a leadership role. So that means best practices means you know how to identify when somebody on the team is doing something that's highly effective, highly productive. And so there's going to be opportunities for you in this managerial type of role to be able to identify, hey, where can we enhance these things? Where can we bring in some technology or some tools? Where can we have maybe some training developed in this area so that we can raise the bar and have this as a standard? Embracing best practices is really important for you in this role. The fourth area that we're going to look at is supervisory skills. And so as a manager in this day-to-day operations, probably the biggest thing that recruiters look to when it comes to their managers is making sure that they have their back. As a recruiter, you want to make sure that your manager, your supervisor has your back. Now, of course, if you're slack, then obviously they may not have your back, but ultimately that's what you're looking for. And so as a supervisor, as a manager in operations that's leading a team, you make sure you got to have that pulse that says, you know what, that recruiter has confidence in me that we can work through issues, we can work through problems, we can resolve conflict, and ultimately that's what solidifies that type of relationship. But as a supervisor, you also have to report to your boss and their boss's boss, right? So there's a stakeholder play in here. Even the customers you have to report to. So it's kind of a balancing act that in a managerial role that you have to make sure that you really walk and thread that needle very carefully effectively, but still demonstrate maximum performance in that area. And then finally, the fifth area here that we want to look at is data metrics. That's right. If you're talking about managing day-to-day operations, that means you have to be good at looking at reports. You have to be good at the cadence of delivering reports, making sure that you share important data and information with your customers. And ultimately, that means that you have to be pretty good and more advanced when it comes to Excel spreadsheets, formulas, pivots, and PowerPoints, putting together briefings and presentations on a regular basis, because that data is going to be used by leadership. That's how you put together strategy. So data metrics and reporting does become a very important factor for you as a recruiter that is thrusted into this leadership role, which is operational. Okay, so the third stage in becoming an effective leader within recruiting is going to be strategic. That's right. As a recruiter, you have been elevated, promoted into this role. You have really aspired and worked. You've gone from developmental to operational, and now you are at strategic. And what exactly does that mean? I'm going to give you these 5 areas that really encompasses the importance of being a strategic leader within your organization. So the first one is going to be vision. And that really means that ties into kind of the mission. What is the mission not only for the company, but what kind of mission do you have within your team? What is the talent acquisition business model? Meaning, how is the company really made up when it comes to your recruiting organization and the structure, the reporting structure, the titles, the names, the responsibilities? Do you have sourcers? Do you have coordinators? How many managers? Do you have leads? Do you have researchers, right? Do you have anybody doing data analysis? Anybody doing marketing, recruitment marketing? So there's an ecosystem that these recruiters are responsible for. And it's not just one thing, there's multiple things. So you're juggling so much information, so many moving parts within your organization. And not only that, your vision has to align with executive leadership's vision. That's right. Whatever their vision is, whatever that they see that they want you to pass on, that is also going to be highly important as well. Now, the second area is going to be influence. And so as a strategic leader, you want to have the ability to influence others. And a lot of times that is going to be data driven. And this is important why the data that's being passed on to you from maybe a recruiter to a lead, to a manager, to a director, to a VP, it has a trickle effect. And so making sure that you have the most accurate data gives you the ability to really be successful in really assessing and determining, hey, do we need to pivot? Do we need to make some changes here with our technology stack, with our human capital investments that we're making? And so that means the ability to influence at this level means that you have to be an effective communicator, which means you have to be a good listener. You have to be approachable. And so those things are important because that's how you give and take when you become an influencer within your organization. The third area is going to be innovation. So as a recruiter, when it comes to innovation, you have to have a good pulse on the technology, on the tools, on the skill sets. I've said this before. Artificial intelligence, automation is going to be so important right now for these recruiters that are in this strategic role to clearly start understanding and not get left behind. So also making sure that there is a methodology in place that is sound, that's solid, and that should be revisited every year at a minimum, right? When it comes to understanding your strategy and the methodology on how you bring in hires. And so also the problem-solving skills have to be important. Just like a president of the United States, when issues come to the president, they're really dealing mainly with problems. And as a leader in a strategic role, you are putting out fires at that level. When they bubble up to your level, that means it needs your attention to make decisions that are sound and quick and effective and done with confidence. And so the fourth area is going to be, as a leader, you want to have a good pulse on your competition and the market. That's right. Understand understanding the leaders in your space, in your industry, is going to be very important. And that means having relationships and friendships with other executives, with other talent acquisition leaders within your industry. Understanding where you rank within the company. And so if there's a top 20 list within your industry and you're ranked 20th, what is your goal? To get to number 1, to get to number 5? What's realistic? What are the other top 10 companies doing? What are the top 3 companies doing? How can you be the lead dog is going to be important. And that means understanding your company culture when it comes to branding. So you want to make sure that you're marketing and you're branding your company in a highly effective manner. But ultimately, as a leader of a talent acquisition company here, you want to make sure that you have a good pulse on the talent that your competitors are recruiting. And because you're going to be asked, go out and find me, a chief technology officer. And so you better be sure that you understand who your competitors are hiring, and having a pulse on the talent at a high level is going to be important, because a lot of times leaders that are at this level, a director or vice president, are usually tasked with the goal to go out and find talent to make some hires there as well. So they still do recruit, believe it or not. And then finally, the 5th area here that we want to focus on when it comes to becoming a strategic leader as a recruiter is going to be, what kind of executive presence do you have? And so for some, they wear the suit like myself, but others don't need the suit, right? And really, it's really, leadership is sort of a style. There's a different type of different styles that come into place when it comes to leadership. But your ability to collaborate with stakeholders, with other executives, with the board, right? The board is really important a lot of times, and making sure that you understand their agenda, the CEO's agenda, the vice president's agenda within the organization. Having that presence that you are elevated, especially within talent acquisition, because usually within talent acquisition, there is a reporting structure that goes straight to the CHRO, so the Chief Human Resources Director. So there's usually kind of that, that relationship that needs to happen in order to be an effective leader. Some organizations do allow talent acquisition to have a direct line to CEOs, which is really the preferred method, I think, when you're talking about modern day recruiting. But understanding executive briefings and reporting, and to be able to articulate that, and more importantly, being able to understand what is the company culture, so that you can go ahead and not only internally be a good communicator and show that presence, but externally be able to do that. Are you out there on podcasts? Are you out there doing any kind of publications? Are you on any panel discussions? Are you going to leadership conferences and shaking hands? These things are highly important as a strategic leader and recruiter that falls under this umbrella here. Well, there you have it, the 3 stages in effective leadership when it comes to talent acquisition, and the roles that you can play as a recruiter as you go through these stages. Now, as I wrap up this episode, I do want to give some additional commentary that I believe is very important, because leadership today can seem kind of confusing in our culture. It's mixed. It's not like where it was in the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s, where we had leaders like Jack Welch leading the best companies of the world, Steve Jobs with the innovation, or even our presidents like JFK or Ronald Reagan. And who can forget our athletes that we turn to as leaders that set that example, like the Michael Jordans of the world that transformed leadership. Today, we have controversial leaders when it comes to our politics, our presidents, even our billionaires, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos of the world have controversy and mixed feelings about that. Our modern era athletes that we typically turn to are no longer around now that Tom Brady is gone. So who do we have to turn to? I do want to say that there is importance in making sure that there is value when it comes to diversity in leadership. It is important to have that mix. And I also want to note how important it is to recognize that if you are a leader, that there is a leadership style that you have. And being aware of that leadership style, it's really detrimental, or it can be a huge asset to you. There are leaders out there that are stoic. They're very approachable. They're personable. There's some that are very introverts and really aren't approachable. There are some leaders out there that really focus on self-branding and reputation. So whether it's a negative or positive reputation, it's good to understand, how do others look at you and see you as a leader? The issue in our industry becomes that leadership development programs are very limited. And this is something that I believe talent acquisition continues to fail us when it comes to recruiters elevating themselves into a leadership capacity. Because there are some limitations out there, the opportunities that recruiters have when it comes to training and development programs under leadership, again, fall short. I encourage you to go back into one of my earlier episodes. It was called From Recruiter to CEO. It was a 5-part series, and I really covered marketing, sales, operations, finance, and HR, but it really got into the weeds of what leadership is all about at a CEO level. I hope this episode was informative. Please remember to subscribe, to like, to comment, to share. It really is helping the podcast grow and get the awareness out there. I want to be able to provide you good value content, but more importantly, practical applications that you can take with this. Until next time, remember, it's all about the mindset.